I think a lot of early stage startups probably want to save some cash. And there's not like there's this glut of unemployed software engineers in the US. I believe there's like 1 million open tech jobs, and it has the highest software engineer salaries in the world. So I don't think there's like, all these software engineers who are struggling to find work in the United States. I think it's more like just it's super hard to find the right person. If you're an American startup, why not look anywhere around the world? And if there was tech, like a really easy tech visa, if H-1B actually worked well, I'm sure a lot of those US companies would be happy to onshore that talent and keep the job, locally. For me, it's not like we're forcing anyone to do anything, right? Like we're just facilitating a market to make it easier for people to build their products and innovate. And at the same time, changing the life of the engineer, whether they stay in Brazil or wherever they are and make a way higher salary, or, they move to Canada or Europe too.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Ilya Brotzky, CEO and co-founder of VanHack, a global platform revolutionizing tech talent recruitment. Under his leadership, VanHack has placed over 2,000 developers and professionals in leading companies like Brex and Deloitte, all while championing a borderless world for tech talent. He's also founder of Mountains for Moms, has a fascinating background spanning entrepreneurship, mentorship, and social impact. Ilya, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to catch up. I guess the last time we saw each other, we ran into each other at the All-In holiday party, right?
Yeah, All-In holiday spectacular. That was a ton of fun and really nice surprise to meet you there.
Yeah, that was wild because we hadn't met in person yet, and we've been talking for years. But, I'd love to, kind of start at the beginning. What inspired you to start VanHack in the first place? And what is VanHack?
Yeah, so VanHack is a tech recruiting platform or company that helps software engineers get international jobs and helps companies hire senior tech talent from anywhere around the world, and either have them work remotely or actually relocate them to closer to their offices or to their cities. We started almost a decade ago in 2015. Actually, even earlier than that, in 2014, I was working abroad in Brazil for about 4 years. I worked in the startup accelerator there that was connecting American investors with Brazilian entrepreneurs. And I was kind of like the token foreigner in the co-working space in the accelerator. So I was doing a lot of like the fundraising and sales, and there was a lot of really good software engineers and at all the different companies. And every time someone found out I'm Canadian, they asked me for kind of tips on how to move there, or they had a friend who wants to move there or something like that. So the idea kind of stuck with me about helping people move to Canada. And so when I came back home in 2014, a lot of those developers that I met down in Brazil started asking me for tips or I'm trying to understand how to actually make it happen. And the first idea that we launched with was a English school. So basically like a career coaching English school where we help people with their resumes, cover letters, help them prep for interviews. And then about a year after doing that, companies started asking us for introductions to developers. And we realized we actually had a bigger business on the B2B side of things and could work in recruitment. So it's kind of how it all started. There's a lot more details, but high level, that was the genesis.
Yeah, that's amazing. How'd you end up working in Brazil?
Yeah, so I got 3 job offers after university, or I got one offer in China, one in India, and one in Brazil. I wanted to work abroad after university. The one in Brazil was the best paying one, and I had actually also been to Brazil before for kind of like an alternative spring break. And so I really enjoyed that week that I was there. And so I thought, well, this seems like the best opportunity, and went down and worked for a mining company, actually. Didn't really like the mining company, but I really liked being in Brazil. So I quit my job and went back to Brazil and worked for a nonprofit from professor at Stanford University who was doing data collection in the slums of Brazil. And I did sales there and closed a pretty big deal with Unilever. And then it's kind of how I ended up living there.
Amazing. And right before we started recording, you're like, hey, the business is back. Tell me what you meant by that in this recruiting business.
Yeah. Recruiting is really cyclical, which is a kind of double-edged sword. When it's really good, it's great. And then when it's not good, no one wants to talk to you when they're doing layoffs. So I guess 5 years now, if you look back at, from COVID, things were, pretty quote unquote normal before COVID. Then COVID hit, and then everything stopped for about 6 months. And once all the government bailouts started happening and everyone went remote and all the money was being printed, everyone had all this cash to hire, and they could hire from anywhere. Like hiring someone from the other side of the world was the same as hiring someone from the other side of the street, because everyone was, or other side of town. Everyone was remote. So our idea of like, hey, hire some person you never met before in Brazil no longer was kind of strange. It just became a mainstream. So that really helped push hiring for us in 2021 and 2022. And then the ZERP bubble burst at the end of 2022, and all the big tech companies started doing layoffs, and all the other, the whole tech industry went through a huge wave of layoffs. So that was a really big crash. And that lasted from about the fall of 2022 to the fall of 2024. And since September, last September here, up till now, the hiring market has started to pick up. It's definitely not back where it was before, but it's going in the right direction, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely cyclical. I think that when we originally connected, my partner worked at Talent Solutions for LinkedIn. So we definitely have experienced that sort of waxing and waning of that. So VanHack, it breaks down the friction of, okay, I'm a US based startup or big company and I want to hire overseas talent. How do I find that talent? How do I hire them, manage them? And there's other platforms like this that help you do payroll overseas. Maybe you could talk about how you partner with those versus like kind of the friction that you guys directly remove.
Yeah, we're all about sourcing and finding that talent. So like a marketplace for software engineers where a lot of, the big companies that you've seen getting a lot of buzz right now, like Deel, Oyster, Remote, they do more of the payroll. It's funny, one of my kind of mentors pitched me on doing a Deel type of company back in 2019. And I was like, no, I don't think that's anything. And then all of a sudden there's like 4 unicorns in that space. We have a good relationship with all those companies because after the hire is made, we get them connected to Deel or one of those options, and those companies do the payroll and all the management. We actually also launched a new product about 1.5 years ago where we do immigration as a service. So we'll bring an engineer who you've already hired. So if you have a developer on your team who's not in North America, we'll bring them to Canada for you so they can be in the same time zone closer to you and do that all as a service. So there's kind of 2 products that we have now.
Interesting. So you can take somebody from Eastern Europe, that's 9 or 10 time zones away, and it's kind of annoying to work with people over there because of the time zone difference or India or whatever.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, we can co-locate them basically roughly in the same time zone in Canada. How does that work?
Yeah. So that's exactly what we do. The way it works is that we have a network of partner companies, agencies, and dev shops that we work with here in Canada who hire the engineer on and then contract them back to the US client. So that allows them to have the visa sponsorship and then, be working as an employee in Canada. Basically, they're pretty much on the same time zone. And we even had one case where the company was in New Jersey and the engineer moved to Toronto. So they went up and visited her in last fall. So, you can really have that kind of close team bond and then, just have a better quality of life for the engineer.
Yeah. Is it easier to immigrate a worker to Canada than the US in this case? Why not just go directly to the US?
Yeah, because H-1B is broken. We'll see if it gets reformed. There was that huge Twitter debate over the holidays, the tech bros versus mega. That was very interesting to follow.
Maybe for anybody that isn't aware and doesn't hang out on Twitter like us tech nerds, tell us what that debate was.
Sure. So, well, first off, I'll just say yes, US immigration is much harder than Canadian. Canada has a really fast and straightforward tech visa. So if you're a software engineer and you have a job offer, it's a really quick 2-month processing time. There's no lottery. There's no cap.
It's just like, okay, you have skills, you have a job offer, you're in.
Basically, obviously, you want to vet the person, make sure they don't have a criminal record and they're healthy. So if they have a terminal illness, they don't go to they take the public health insurance, all those things that any other immigrant would be vetted against. But essentially, if you're, have a job offer that's over the median salary, though it's not just any salary, has to be over.
It's not a janitorial job somewhere. It's this is a skilled job with you need credentials or college degree or at least be highly skilled trade or something.
Yeah, you just need a job offer with over a certain salary from a Canadian company that's that has the capacity to pay your salary. So that the company needs to prove their financial situation, and there's a basic level of vetting there.
Yeah,
but if you're a tech startup that's raised a few $1 million, etc., you can get the visa for the engineer, and then they come over. Their spouse can work, their kids can study in school, and so it's way easier than H-1B, which has a lottery associated with it. It's only April 1st once a year. Then it takes another 8 months for the person to actually move. Their spouse can't work. Another thing is that with this Canadian visa, it's called Global Talent Stream. The visa's for 3 years, and even if the person gets let go, they can still stay in Canada for the remainder of the 3 years. Whereas with H-1B, they have to leave in 30 days. So there's a lot of these things that I keep telling my American friends, you guys just need to copy us or even do a better version of what we've been doing. And it's not just Canada. I mean, Germany, Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, basically every Western country other than the US has a visa like this. And so, getting back to the Twitter debate over the holidays, I forget how it started. I think maybe it was Vivek Ramaswamy who made the tweet, or someone set off the Twitter storm about H-1B reform or thinking about changing H-1B. And then, all the ultra mega people who don't want any immigration got all upset but at the same time, all the tech companies, all the tech people who are now on the right were saying this is something we need. We need smart, talented people who contribute to our society. These aren't illegal immigrant gang members who are holding up
Yeah. These are
apartment
highly
buildings.
credentialed,
Yeah,
highly skilled people coming in.
yeah, yeah. You can't paint all immigrants under one brush, kind of thing. So yeah, that's what the difference, I guess, between U.S. and Canadian immigration. And I really hope the U.S. changes, the immigration process, because obviously I want to bring tech talent to the U.S. and be really good for our business.
That's such an enlightened policy. How do people in Canada feel about it?
Well, there's definitely a strong anti-immigrant sentiment in the last few years that's cropped up because we have a huge housing crisis, and a lot of the immigrants that have been brought in the last, I would say, basically since Trudeau took over, have been like low skilled or students or refugees. So we have a little bit of the same thing where, immigrants kind of just like in general get painted with one brush of like being a negative for society. I think a lot of people understand the difference and are pretty positive towards skilled workers. For example, VanHack, we brought 1,500 people to Canada. That's $150 million in annual salary. That's tax being paid and jobs being created. And every foreign worker that comes to Canada or any country creates 3 new jobs because they're now renting apartment, buying cars, going to restaurants, movie theaters, spending their money. And
not only that, but you're getting the money from American startups, it sounds like. So you're basically siphoning off
well,
money.
yeah. So there's 2 things. Yeah, some of it we've brought about $5 million in American salaries into Canada in the last year and a half.
Right.
There's that, and we hope to bring. I've been telling the government, or like anyone who listened, is if I can bring 10,000 people, there literally is demand for 10,000 people to come here who all have their salaries paid by American companies into Canada. So there's the whole trade war with the tariffs. Like I'm like, I have a solution, but it hasn't happened yet.
And you're hiring somebody on VanHack, and you're gonna do this whole thing. Like, how much money do they save? Do they go to? Let's imagine their equivalent talent.
Yeah.
Like how much does a startup save by hiring somebody on VanHack and doing the 2-month process and getting them to Canada and stuff like that?
Yeah, for a Canadian company who's bringing them here, probably saving around maybe like not too much, maybe 25%, maybe less. The real savings come if you're a US startup and you're hiring through VanHack in Latin America, or just even on your own, right? Like we just made a hire this like 5 minutes before we started. The salary is $60K USD for a senior Java developer. Probably going to be paid 150 or more in the US, depending on what part of the country.
Only 50%. It could be even more.
Yeah.
So you get equivalent talent for half the cost. Startups are happy because they extend the runway. They can do more with less. And then mega people are happy because we're not bringing people into the US.
Well, that's the thing. That's the argument that
Right.
is just so silly. Like, why are you anti-tech immigration? Because the job is just going to be sent overseas. The developer, why not
Would
bring?
you rather have the developer come here, pay taxes, buy a house, like buy a car?
Think about how much money is being spent right now by U.S. tech companies of hiring software engineers abroad. Like, it's probably billions. 1,000 people is 100 million if average salary is 100K. So there's, I'm sure, at least 10, 20,000 tech workers, easily, probably more, that are working for US companies and living in Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, right? So if I were you guys, I would just make it easy tech visa and bring like onshore all those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be a really easy way to import jobs, and even like make it so they have to live in a specific area, like more rural places. I don't know exactly how you can control that, but that's the argument against, like, we don't want tech immigration. Well, you're just shipping the money out of the country.
How do you help these startups source and vet and screen and place these candidates? Maybe walk us through that typical process of engagement and how you guys make money and all that stuff.
Yeah. We make money on a per hire basis, and we have a talent pool of about 500,000 people that have signed up to the platform all the time. One of the kind of favorite features that I have is everyone records a video about a minute long introducing themselves. And then we use an AI algorithm that we built in-house to verify if their English is good enough or not to get hired abroad based on the data set of all the hires we have. And so that is the first step. Afterwards, they do a coding test. We do a live coding test where they answer technical questions depending on the stack that they're working with. And then after that, if needed, we'll do a cultural call. Sometimes we don't need to if we can watch the video and kind of get enough information that way. But usually we will have a call with the candidate just to check. Every company has their own needs, and then we'll share the candidate. We built our own kind of applicant tracking system platform where companies can sign up, see all the profiles, book interviews, chat with the candidates, kind of like an Upwork style. And then we also like to have a Slack connect with the clients. So we can chat really quickly and help with them with anything they need as soon as possible. So it's kind of a combination of platform and human. So kind of like a tech-enabled service.
Have you heard of a startup called Lightscreen? They're a portfolio company. About 7 episodes ago, in relation to this episode, Prachi was on the program. They use AI to automate a lot of the technical screening. So I don't know, like, to what degree you guys have built that out or might want to partner with them.
Yeah. Right now we're using Woven, and we're about to test another platform called Repls that does AI technical interviews. But yeah, I'd love to. That does ring a bell, Lightscreen.
I saw their. I mean, we wrote a check from the fund. We really
Nice.
like their demo and the team. So yeah, I'll make an intro.
Yeah, it's such a hard problem, right? Like, how do you know who's good technically at scale? I always make this analogy of like, it's kind of like, how do you know someone's attractive? Everyone has their own different sense. So, you can kind of
I
tell.
know when I
But
see it.
yeah.
That's how I answer. So how do you evaluate startups? I'm like, I know it when I see it. I've looked at tens of thousands of startups, so like I know it when I see it. This episode of the Ignite podcast is brought to you by our friends at Build, spelled BYLDD. Build is a development agency that specializes in helping early stage startups, especially non-technical founders and teams, build and launch scalable revenue generating software products. Most startups don't have $100K to hand over to a big agency, and honestly, for your first product, you probably shouldn't. Sure, you could try rolling the dice on some freelancers, but that's a gamble with unclear costs and a lot of project management headaches and no guarantees. That's where Build comes in. For just $10K in about a month, Build can turn your validated idea into a real product that's ready to go to market. It's a smart, efficient way to build a foundation for a company of any size. And yes, companies that start with Build can and have scaled very large. Their clients have gone on to be backed by YC, Y Combinator, and Google, and raise funding at multi-million-dollar valuations. Ready to get started? Head over to build.com. Again, that's BYLDD, to connect to Ayush and the team and let him know you heard about Build on the Ignite podcast. So why would somebody use VanHack versus, you mentioned Upwork, like just go to Upwork and just hire somebody there?
Yeah, Upwork's really good for like short-term project-based work, but I would say VanHack's more better for like direct hires. We also do a lot more vetting than they do. So yeah, I think like if you're looking for someone who's going to be like a full-time team member for, on average, our candidates stay for about 3 years, someone who's really going to be part of that core team, then that's what we're for. But if you're looking for kind of like a short-term, maybe 3-6 month project or something like that, Upwork probably is a better fit.
I'm going to hire an EA at some point, right? And I could go to Athena and I think it's like $2,000 a month or $2,500 a month. Or should I just go through you and you could help me find like
No, Athena would be like for like a VA, right? Like we do software engineers, so it's just a different type of talent.
So you're focused on software engineering talent.
Yeah.
Data scientists,
Tech
designers.
talent. So we've done like everything from designers to digital marketing, but the most common is like software engineers, full stack, DevOps, all etc. But yeah, mostly tech talent.
Have you ever told a startup like, hey, you shouldn't hire overseas talent, and here's why? Has there ever been situations where you're like, no, I think you should get somebody in-house?
The way I look at it is even if they are overseas, they are in-house in a way, you know what I mean? Like they're like most of the companies we work with are fully remote, and the person's just like on their Slack, in their Jira, putting code in production on the stand-ups, like on their team, like on their payroll. So I don't think that's ever happened. Sometimes when it's like a really early startup and they can only pay with equity or they're looking kind of like for a co-founder, that's not really what we can help with. Typically, that's better to have someone local. Most of the time, if you're looking to hire a developer, why narrow yourself just to engineers who are in a specific geo?
I'd love to have you opine on kind of the global impact of what you do, because I think you can make a case both ways economically. Like, oh, this is great for this top talent in other countries. They come to Canada or they stay in Latin America or wherever, and they make more money, right? So now they got higher paying jobs. There's more innovation in the US, creating more value. But yeah, that job could have gone to somebody here in the US or Canada. So like maybe you could talk about how you think economically, where do you fall on that kind of line of reasoning? And
I think the first step for any North American company is to hire someone locally. Like that's usually what they want to do. It's just that there's not enough, especially here in Canada. The issue is they all go down the US, right? Like like the whole Waterloo grads, I don't know there's like just generally a pipeline of all the Waterloo grads all go to all the FANG companies, etc., down the valley. So a lot of
the same H1 process for them, for Canadians to come down to the US.
There's like a TN visa. It's kind of part of NAFTA or whatever the new name is.
Yeah, a little easier, right?
It's a lot easier for Canadian citizens and Mexicans. Also in Canada, there's a really big incentive to have someone in Canada because we have something called SHRED, which is like a government grant that pays about $3 billion in cash back to Canadian startups to have developers on their team. So around half the salary of every engineer in Canada is repaid at the end of the year by the Canadian government if they're doing like really technical innovation work, which most of them are. So the incentive is really just to have someone locally. In terms of the US, I think a lot of early stage startups probably want to save some cash. And there's not like there's this lot of unemployed software engineers in the US. I believe there's like 1 million open tech jobs, and it has the highest software engineer salaries in the world. So I don't think there's like, all these software engineers who are struggling to find work in the United States. I think it's more like just it's super hard to find the right person. If you're an American startup, why not look anywhere around the world? And if there was tech, like a really easy tech visa, if H-1B actually worked well, I'm sure a lot of those U.S. companies would be happy to onshore that talent and keep the job, locally. That's the way I look at it. For me, it's not like we're forcing anyone to do anything, right? Like we're just facilitating a market to make it easier for people to build their products and innovate, and at the same time, changing the life of the engineer, whether they stay in Brazil or wherever they are and make a way higher salary, or they move to Canada or Europe too. We brought a lot of people over to Europe and just like completely changed their life because they're living in a better country.
And you've been at this for 10 years, you said?
Yeah. Official corporation date was July 28th, 2015. But, it was kind of a side project since kind of early, or I would say fall 2014. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And so you've seen a lot of change. I mean, you've gone from pre-COVID to post-COVID. You've gone from, remote work's kind of a fringy kind of thing in 2015, 2016 to like, hey, this is pretty normal. Yeah, maybe you could talk about some of those headwinds and tailwinds over the last 10 years.
Yeah, when we started the company and we started asking companies to sponsor visa, that was like a no, just like in Canada. I mean, when I first started the company, I literally thought we would just be bringing Brazilians to Vancouver. That was like the very niche, hence the name VanHack. And by the way, now Van is like a vehicle that transports talent. We pivoted the name. Who knows, one day we'll change it. So in the beginning, it was like very just, like a showstopper. If you have a company, it was only like Shopify and a few other companies in Canada who would even entertain the concept of sponsoring visa. And then in 2017, because of that, we expanded to Europe. So we did Techstars in Berlin and started bringing a lot of engineers to Europe, Germany, Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, the UK. And then in 2017, the Canadian government released this visa, the Global Talent Stream. And that really changed things, where companies started realizing it's pretty easy to now bring talent to Canada. So that was really good. And we started bringing a lot more engineers over and making more hires and growing. We helped one company hire over 100 people and bring them all to Canada and work for their office in kind of like the prairies, which is like the Midwest of Canada. We're just like, there's not a lot of software engineers there. And that kind of led us up till COVID. And then when COVID hit right away, it was just like no one was moving across borders. No one was hiring. It was a huge, I thought that was the end. It was a good run. Had to do our first ever layoff back then. It was really tough. But then, like hiring remotely became mainstream. And like I mentioned earlier already, but like that was a rocket ship. So yeah, it was a really big tailwind, and we just were struggling to keep up and grew the team a lot. And then again, there was a bubble burst and had to kind of come back down to earth. So a lot of waves, but still here. And yeah.
Amazing. How has AI, especially over the last, couple of years with large language models and all these reasoning models coming out, like how has that changed hiring for engineers? Are you noticing any tailwinds or headwinds in that round?
It's funny. I think at the beginning, a lot of companies were really like steadfast on not hiring any more developers. Like I remember hearing a few people being like, there's not going to be any more software engineers ever again. And so we're not going to hire anymore and just like keep the team the way it is, which I totally understand. If one engineer can now be 3 times more effective, if you hire, 3 times more, you're all of a sudden 9 times more effective, or whatever the math is, right? I think now people realize that they do need, software engineers, and they do add a lot of value, and because your product just needs, like, the standards for what your product are and how quickly the competition moves, it has increased. So you need to keep up. It's also allowed, I feel like, for a lot more companies to be created. So there's like more smaller startups, whereas it's not just like a lot of big companies, but it hasn't been too much of an effect other than like a lot of companies just really needing AI engineers more than before. So
yeah. And my expectation is hiring will pick up and there'll be more engineering done than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be this paradox where we'll be like, wait, I thought engineers were 10x more efficient now. Why are we still hiring as many? Or we're hiring even more? And it'll be a Jevons paradox again of, because the engineers are ever more effective and efficient, there'll be ever more software engineering done.
Yeah, I agree. Like you think about how much software engineering was done 30 years ago, right? Like a lot less than it was now because there wasn't a lot of products like invented that we have today. So I think the trend's just going to continue. I think I agree with
Yeah,
you.
I mean, you look at all the abstractions and libraries and the cloud, and the availability of the toolkit has gotten more sophisticated and has created an ever increasing fulcrum on cognitive talent. And I think AI just to keep accelerating that. Although the claims of software engineering is dead and over will be greatly exaggerated, I think, in hindsight. That'd be my expectation, because people are going to still have to look at code and understand it. It'll just be like you're just doing more with less, I think, with AI.
Yeah, someone's going to have to manage the agents.
So at some point, some human has to go, is this what I want?
Yeah.
And why is this code broken? And the AI can't figure it out. So what do you kind of see evolving for VanHack and generally global tech recruitment over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, good question. I mean, these days I'm just trying to take it like one day at a time, because it's in such a roller coaster, and one day you're having a great day, the other day it's a terrible day. So I'm trying to okay, let's stick with. But I like to think that over time, the need or the ability for tech talent to move to new countries is just going to get easier and easier. So there's going to be kind of more of a competition between countries for tech talent, and the country that has the easiest way to relocate talent and the most interesting jobs will have the most tax revenue from the tech industry. So I'd like to be part of that in some way, where we can facilitate, the relocation of software engineers to places where maybe people traditionally didn't think they would want to move to, and kind of create new hubs. Specifically, I'm being Canadian, pretty pro bringing software engineers to small growing communities here that we have. We have the second most amount of land in the world, and the one of the lowest.
I mean, let's be careful. Most of that's under ice, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Unless we become the 51st state, who knows? But
right.
So there's a lot of really great areas that kind of are underdeveloped. So yeah, I'd love to be able to bring now we've got 2,000, hopefully 10,000, 20,000, who knows, software engineers across the world. But yeah, I think just keep doing what we're doing, trying to get bigger. Every day is a grind.
Yeah, I love that. Well, maybe we kind of wrap it up with a rapid fire, which is my favorite segment. What's the most inspiring story of a VanHacker you've encountered?
Ooh, great question. Well, there's a lot of different ones, but the one that kind of comes to mind right away is this guy Omar, who's from Cuba, and we had a recruiting fair in Sao Paulo in 2018, I believe, and he flew all the way from Cuba to Sao Paulo, which is pretty far, from the Caribbean all the way down to South America, and he paid his own way just to be at that event. And ended up getting hired as a mobile engineer, I believe iOS, and then moved to Canada, and now is working at Meta. So probably making at least 200-300K.
Yeah, probably more than that.
He probably has a great salary right now, and probably Canadian citizen. Just
Amazing.
Him having the courage to invest in paying that flight, coming all the way down. He didn't have any guarantee of a job offer, just an interview. Met the company in person, they hired him, and there you go.
Shows dedication. Yeah, I flew in from Cuba to be here.
Yeah,
that's kind of far.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's 2,000 miles away.
Yeah,
it seems close because it's in the Caribbean, but it's still another 2,000 miles south, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and probably in a Cuban salary is pretty expensive as well.
Yeah,
he brought me this little magnet. I have it. Usually have it here. I can't. My kids I have been playing with all the magnets I have on my wall here, but it was one of those old sit-night cars, the Chevrolet, the old ones they have in Cuba. So he brought me as a souvenir. So that was pretty inspiring.
Wow.
Yeah. And then just generally you hear people having kids and becoming citizens, like I mentioned a lot. That's pretty cool. Another thing that comes to mind is during the Ukraine war, when it first started, we did a big initiative around helping Ukraine talent get hired in Canada, and we helped about 22 people. And, actually, one of them, this guy Andre, his wife was 8 months pregnant right when the war broke out, and he got a job offer the night before the invasion, the night on February 21st, and when the 22nd the invasion happened. So that gave him the confidence to drive to Poland across the border the next day, and then I think 3 or 4 days later they closed the border for all men between 85 and 60. So he literally just got out of Ukraine and was able to have the baby in Poland and then fly to Canada. He's now living in Calgary. So that was a pretty inspiring story, because he probably would have had to go to war, and who knows what happened after that.
Yeah,
a young family. So yeah, things like that.
That feels good. If you could hire talent from any one country for the next 5 years, which would it be?
Any one country. Well, I'm biased because my wife is from Brazil and my kids are half Brazilians, and so where we started the company, just like the most natural fit, I think, for North American companies to hire from there because it's basically same time zone and pretty similar culture. Rather than to just 200 million people, a lot of really well-educated software engineers are from there. So I think I'd have to say Brazil, but there's a lot of really great countries with great talent everywhere.
Yeah. Remote first or hybrid? What's the future of work?
I'm a big fan of remote first. We've been remote first since 2015. Before it was cool, because we couldn't really afford to have an office. So I didn't want to pay the $2,000 a month back then to have an office. And actually, I've always had this kind of dream of living remotely since I started having to work in 2010 and like doing a 2-hour commute each way to go to an office in downtown. I'm a big fan of remote. I'm seeing a shift back to hybrid more and more, but I personally think remote is the way to go.
Yeah. How do you keep people engaged? Do you get together on a monthly, quarterly basis in person?
We don't really have a cadence for that, especially the last couple of years with all the economic shifts. It's been hard to keep that. We are getting together next week, actually, the team that's here in Vancouver, and probably we'll do something like a team retreat sometime this year. But mostly it's just an all hands on Thursdays, and then everyone has one-on-ones with their manager kind of thing.
What's the biggest challenge you guys faced in the early days of VanHack?
I think just getting employers, getting companies to take us seriously. That was a really big challenge because we don't really have a track record. And the whole hiring someone you've never met from abroad, doing the visa sponsorship, all the paperwork, it was a pretty big burden, like a barrier for employers. So a lot of companies didn't want to bother with that. So yeah, I mean, it still is the biggest challenge in finding employers and making the match. That's always the hardest thing.
What's a tech tool you can't live without?
Slack. Pretty addicted to Slack.
Yeah. I hate Slack for tasks. Like if it's something that I have to go do and then I read it on Slack, then I have to mark it unread to remember to go do it, or I have to bookmark it or add it to a list or copy and paste it into my task list. Yeah. So I always tell my team, like, do not Slack me tasks. Like, hey, what do you think of this deck? Or hey, what do you think of this startup? It's just email it to me because then it's in my task list. Which city has the best work-life balance for tech professionals?
I am biased. I'm from Vancouver. I will say Vancouver, but I don't know. It's a lot of
lots of nature there, lots of stuff to do.
Yeah, I grew up here, so I definitely am biased. But no matter where in the world I go, I always feel like coming back home is just like this. There's no place like this. So.
Yeah. I'm from Seattle, so I kind of feel the same way. And I think we talked about this, but most of my family's in the Vancouver area. So I haven't been back there for a long time. But
we should come for a Web Summit. We're having a big tech conference called Web Summit.
Yeah,
it'll be in May. If you want to come up, we got a free ticket.
Okay, maybe that'll be a good excuse to fly up.
Yeah, a lot of startups looking for investment, and the US dollar goes far right now, 1.4.
1.4 now, wow.
Yeah.
Advice you'd give to someone considering their first international hire?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is that it's not as scary as you think. People are people everywhere, and definitely make sure that you have alignment of expectations in terms of communication, because a lot of times I think probably the biggest thing that makes it so an international hire doesn't work out is trust breaks down. So you want to make sure that they understand what you're looking for. Of okay, like these are the meetings. This is how quickly I want you to reply to messages. This is how quickly I want you to get things done. And kind of like the SLA almost of what it's like to work here, because otherwise people might just be working and you won't know, and it can be miscommunication that way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing some insights and your experiences with us. Really fun to hear about your journey and what you're up to at VanHack. Where can startups and entrepreneurs, big companies listening, get in touch with you and learn more about VanHack?
Yeah, vanhack.com. Just sign up there. Or my email is just Ilya, ILYA, @vanhack.com. So pretty easy to find. I'm also the only person in the world with my name. So if you Google me, I'll come up.
Really? I don't. I definitely have the opposite problem with my name. Like there's thousands of us apparently. So that's nice. People will be like, "You're not the CMO of Zuora? No, not that guy. Oh, you're not the guitarist for Weezer? No, not that Brian Bell either.
Guitarist for Weezer, nice.
Yeah.
I saw them live last year.
Nice.
Yeah, I used to hate it, right? Growing up, you had a weird name, and spelling, and I used to really, really hate it. But now, I guess it's good for SEO. So
yeah, totally.
I better not do something bad because the press will find out.
But yeah, unless you do something bad. Yeah, there are criminals named Brian Bell too, so that's great. Yeah, so it's like every flavor. Yeah, thanks for coming on. It was great to catch up.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. This was a lot of fun.